Welcome to the Play Their Way podcast, where we talk about all things in child first coaching. I'm your host, Laura Jane Jones, and today I'm excited to welcome our special guest, Kate Iorpenda. Welcome, Kate. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Kate is from No. Fan Club, the UK's first independent platform dedicated to supporting parents in grassroots and academy football. That's a bit of a mouthful, Kate. So first of all, tell us a little bit about the organisation and how it came about.
Sure. So No. Fan Club was set up by Marcia Lewis, who's the mum of Miles Lewis-Skelly, currently playing for Arsenal and has had a time with the England team last season. And she was somebody who was not familiar with football and just supporting her son to play. But there was interest in Miles from a young age. And she just had a lot of questions, I think, around what the journey was like, what she should know. And people started to come in and express interest in him, agents, scouts and so on. And she just really felt that there was a need to understand more. So she was always trying to learn, but she took a really big decision to do a master's in football business a few years ago. And part of her study was to just talk to parents within the academy system who were feeling very lost and confused and unable to find the support and information they needed. So her thesis sort of led to this idea that she really wanted to provide a space for parents from the grassroots all the way through to the professional game to answer some of the questions, to sort of dispel some of the myths and find out how to build a community where parents could really support each other and really help their kids enjoy their sport and move through the journey for however long they were in it, and that it would be something that she could offer to parents on a regular basis through a platform. So she built the No. Fan Club platform, and it's really grown from there. She's been providing resources, podcasts, videos, information. But more recently, when I got involved, we started to develop workshops, and we now go into football clubs, grassroots clubs. Even we've done workshops with the FA, and we're providing information to try and support parents on that journey. So it's growing, and I think trying to do a lot of things in different ways just to help parents be a bit more informed and a bit more confident about how they can best help their kids.
So it's obviously about support and education. What does that education piece look like? Where are the biggest holes for parents when their kids are in these environments, do you think?
I think it starts really early. I think it even starts at the grassroots. You know, many of us take our kids along just for the fun, drop in football sessions. Perhaps, you know, they might get involved in more sort of structured sessions. But then there's already you start to hear about, the scouts on the sideline, or my friend's just got a trial at an academy, and it's this mystery world really. And for many people, they're just not familiar with it unless they've been a footballer or been in the industry. It can be quite confusing, and it's quite cliquey, and I think that as parents initially, you're just sort of wanting to ask questions but not sure who to ask. But then I think, particularly for families that go into a professional academy system, which they're going in very younger and younger at the moment, but officially they're registered in the age, it's around under 8 into the under 9s. It's sort of seen very much like a privilege to be offered something like that. And often people walk into it quite blindly. And I think for us, one of the biggest problems is that parents aren't necessarily doing their research before, understanding what the commitment is, understanding whether it's the best thing for their child at that time, understanding that it's a business really, and that clubs are there to make money, provide footballers, sell on footballers, and that the academy system, while an incredible opportunity, isn't going to be a professional career for every child that enters it. So I think for me, for No. Fan, it's the gaps really are in that sort of mismatched expectations about what the journey will involve, how much it can mean in terms of commitment if you're in it for a long time, and that there are a lot of sides to the industry that many parents will not fully understand, and sometimes that leads them to make decisions or act in certain ways from a place of misinformation.
Is there a danger that parents are romanced by the concept of football academies?
100%. I mean, I think, we've talked before about this idea that, for many, many children, boys and girls, that they have this idea that the opportunity to become a professional footballer. And, I have 2 professional footballer sons. They're in their early start of their
Humble
career.
brag there, I like
that. No. But that they're in the early part of their careers. And this idea that it's glamorous has been quickly, removed from my head. It's hard work and it's really relentless. And I think, if I can tell any parents, it's this idea that you sort of are catapulted into this glamorous world where everything is just shiny and lovely and it's easy, or that there's some kind of huge financial gain that comes when the moment you sign a professional contract. It's just not like that. And so I think that the real issue for families is just trying to be able to take their time, enjoy it as they're going along, and not get caught up with this idea that there is this, I guess some sort of like finish line which we're all going to reach, because that's just not the case.
Kate, as you've mentioned, you've got 2 boys who are on their professional football journeys, which is really exciting, but I can imagine that journey to this point has been a difficult one, and one that you've had to learn a lot along the way. So what have been your biggest learnings over those years?
I think for me, I think my boys just loved football from the very beginning. So I've always felt that while they're enjoying it, just keep doing it. I think what I have learned along the way is that there are lots of people who don't have that perhaps balanced and realistic expectation, and it becomes something that means so much for the child, but often through the sort of family. And that can be something that can be quite difficult. It adds a lot of pressure, a lot of anxiety. And I think for me, recognising over these years that my boys are doing best when they're enjoying it and having fun. And that's from the age of 7, 8 and to the age now of 18 and 20. They talk about the best bits is when they're having fun and they're enjoying it and they're with good teammates and there isn't the pressure and there isn't the expectation and they can just play with freedom. So I think that's what I've learned as very much, and it confirms what I feel very strongly myself. But I think it's taught me that the sort of over professionalization of children at a very young age and the sort of kind of pressure to do more is actually quite dangerous, and I've seen a lot of people become quite disillusioned and unhappy, and players who just had enough really as well have walked away from it. So I think those have been the biggest learning, and I think probably from a personal point of view with my 2 sons is that you cannot plan for anything, that you just have to roll with what's going, because things can change in a moment. An injury, a new manager, a move from a club, a release, whatever it is, that you've got to find a love of it in itself. You can't just be fixated on one pathway, because realistically most players are going to be moving in different directions, in out of leagues and so on. So it is about really just enjoying the ride.
Keeping your mum hat on, you won't be unique in your outlook that you wanted your boys to enjoy it, but do you think you were in the minority when they were younger? Do you think that a lot of parents are putting too much pressure on their children?
I would say our experience with Number One Fan is that most parents have the right intentions, but sometimes are not well enough informed and are making decisions that they think are for the best interests of their kids, but perhaps have just not really understood what might be going on. So I would say, I wouldn't say that, I would say that most are doing it for the right reasons and want their kids to do well. Like anything, piano lessons, swimming lessons, art, you if your child shows an aptitude for something, you're going to support them and you're going to try and give them the best space and opportunity to do that. But I think what the danger is with football is that there is a lot more going on around that narrative that is linked to, the sort of cult status of footballers, the amount of money in the industry, and I think the expectations that this is something that is achievable for anyone who wants to give it a shot, and that's really not the reality, and that we need to be sort of helping parents see that the experience of continuing with a long-term love and engagement in sport at whatever level is so beneficial in itself, and it shouldn't be about somehow, if I don't get to this finish line, then there was no point doing it in the first place. And I think that for me is one of the saddest parts of meeting parents who regret getting involved because it was destructive, or it damaged their family dynamic, or that their child is disillusioned and doesn't play sport anymore. I think it should never be like that. And Marcia and I, Number One Fan Club, we would really advocate that there are things that we can all do to mean that whether it's grassroots and non-league football, or whether it's elite football into a professional career, there's lots that we can do that makes it more likely that it's something that everyone benefits from, rather than anything that is about disappointment or regret or failure.
How much do coaches have a responsibility to make sure that they're not cultivating those expectations?
I think we all do, and I think coaches are part of that story. I think there's a real, every coach is different. Every coach is working in a different way, and and all through these years, I've seen my boys be taught by many different coaches, and so I don't think it's like there's not a one size fits all. But I do think for coaches, they have the same responsibility about setting expectations, and I think you will see there are some coaches who are really proactive in developing an environment of fun and engagement, and children leading the sport, and just understanding more of their voice in it. But at the same time, they may be people that don't believe that it's about competition or improving, and I think so there's a sort of a sense there that it's important to recognise that competition and achievement and progress is also a really positive thing that you can still have fun doing. But there's no doubt we meet a lot of coaches, and mine have over the years, who are people who are very competitive, and also it's also about their identity and success. So coaches that may not be really honest with a parent because they're making decisions about their success as a coach, not just about an individual child. So I think there are big responsibilities for coaches to be able to talk to parents and say, realistically, this in this team, your child may not get as much game time because I'm working towards achieving X, Y, and Z with this team, and your child is not of the standard. That there are coaches that we meet who are sort of collecting a lot of players, but not necessarily helping parents understand what the ambition is for a team, so that parents and players themselves can choose the environment they want to be in. Am I in the one where I'm just playing and we're enjoying it, or is this something where I'm actually aiming for progression and I'm looking to move up the ranks? I mean, I play in a netball team at the moment, and the thing I always say is, if we get promoted, I'm leaving, because I want to just play when it's fun, and I want to be enjoying the team side of it, and I'm not interested in us being hugely successful. There are plenty of other teams where that is the case, but I'm happy doing that. And I think that's the thing, it's recognising where is the space where you're going to have the most enjoyment. And for some parents, I think the communication around that isn't always clear.
What do you say to coaches then who say that this is about competition, especially when we're talking about these elite football academies? When it comes to kids coaching, should we allow competition and results to be had in lieu of fun? Or do we have a responsibility to maintain fun and play for children, even in elite competitive environments?
Personally, I feel 100% we've got to make it fun, and it's got to be enjoyable. I mean, I think there's no doubt that every human does better when they are feeling positive and whatever they're trying to do. I think, however, that there's nothing wrong with having fun and achievement and competition. And I would say that, I can really see in my own kids that having a bit of competition was something that really inspired them, and they stepped up when there was an element of competition. I was also a primary school teacher, and it was the best way to get stuff done in a classroom was to put people in teams and say, right, who's going to come up with the idea for the there is a sort of a natural thing where they want to sort of work together and achieve something. And I don't think that they have to be, separate things. I think they very much can work together. But I think it's a fine balance between that idea that and sadly we do see it a lot in grassroots, of this idea that some children are expendable because they're in a team environment where they're being sort of sidelined, because then the coach's ambition is to win, and that child may not be able to. And I think it's very hard. You can't have a situation where everyone gets equal game time if you're in a competitive environment that's trying to move forward. But at the same time, we should be able to find ways that we can have the same inclusion, that all kids are benefiting from the sport, and that we're honest with families about where they should be to get their best football and enjoy it the most. And I just think there's a lot of smoke and mirrors and a bit cloak and dagger in this industry that just means that parents feel confused. And we know that the parents who are confused and a little bit ignorant about what's going on are often the ones that are the most forward and maybe creating conflict, because they have an anxiety related to just not quite knowing what's going on. Why is my son not playing, or why is my daughter's not been scouted and the others have, or whatever it is. So I think there's definitely more that coaches could do to help parents understand what their plan is.
Is there an irony that we focus a lot on the communication between coaches and children, when in fact the relationship and the conversation needs between coaches and parents?
Yeah, I mean, I totally understand why coaches, and I've heard them say it, and I don't think it's unfair at all, but coaches will often say, but dealing with the parents is the hardest part of my job, and I get that. But I also would say that, being a parent myself and spending a lot of time with other parents, the parents that often are the most combative or maybe are most challenging are people who have an idea and just don't know how to execute it, and maybe have never had the chance to talk to someone about it. You'll often find it's people who don't really know the industry but just want their child desperately to do well, and it's a real kind of overprotective nature and parent wanting their child to succeed. And that actually, if coaches could spend a bit more time talking to parents, saying, this is how things work, this is what I'm trying to do, it won't always feel comfortable. I've spoken to your child and they're okay with it, so maybe you talk to them and understand. And I know that coaches avoid talking to parents. I've spoken to many coaches who say, I swerve when I see them coming, and I understand why. But I think you're absolutely right that the biggest challenge for coaches is to be able to, I think, find that time to recognise that if a parent understands or a guardian understands what a coach is trying to do, they're much more likely to let them get on with it and not interfere. We spend a lot of time talking to parents and saying that actually you can end up doing more damage by being involved and thinking what the coach is trying to do, and advising or shouting on the sidelines or taking them for extra because you don't think this coach is doing the right thing, instead of actually having a perfectly reasonable conversation. Say, tell me what you're planning here and let me reinforce it back at home. So of course that's not going to deal with every parent. There is always going to be parents who know best and have decided that they understand the system and know how to do it and don't need any help. And I think that would be fair enough to swerve those discussions if you've tried and you're not getting anywhere. But I think on the whole, most parents would benefit from a bit more clarity. I think the lack of clarity leads to that anxiety and that sort of fear that they're somehow missing out. And I think that's what I hear a lot of parents sort of just saying, lot of questions, like who's on the sideline, what do scouts do, how do I get into an academy? And that's what we want to do, is try and provide a bit more information so people are a bit more informed and perhaps a little bit calmer in their interactions.
How difficult is it, do you think, for parents when they are accused of interfering, when they're accused of being helicopter parents in these environments, when it is actually just their child that they care about and their outcomes in football and in those environments?
I feel quite sort of protective of some parents, because I think a lot of them are asking hard questions and not getting good answers, which again is why Number One Fan really exists, is that there isn't really much information shared with parents at any level. Even when you join a grassroots team, or you've been playing in a development centre of an academy, or you're in the full professional academy, we did a survey with parents, and we found, really strong evidence to suggest that parents are signing up for professional academies at a young age with very little information about what's required of them. And our survey also showed that like 66% of academy parents were feeling stressed, anxious or overwhelmed, and that just shouldn't be the case. This is supposed to be a fun pastime. Of course, there's a lot involved with getting kids to training and all of that after school stuff, which is not just to do with professional football academies. That's just generally life with children doing activities. But I think there is information that could be shared that would just make it easier. And I do think parents get demonized quite a lot, and we spend a lot of time with parents just answering basic questions, and you sort of see the relief and the pressure lift off them, because they've been worrying that they should be doing more. And they're often worried about, how do I do more? I can't afford to do more. This idea that they should be having extra sessions or strength and conditioning. And I think the biggest problem has been this sort of over-professionalisation of the sport, so that people feel that from what used to be take your kid to a drop-in and come back and have lunch, has now got to, has he got the right gear? Is he in the right boots? Should I be paying for an extra session on speed and agility? Should they be on trial by now? When should I get them into the academy? And it feels overwhelming. And to me, that's very much led by the kind of industry, and the football system is building that, but also the sort of social media and what's being promoted as what parents need to do if they're serious about football.
We know that coaches spend a lot of time on self-reflection when it comes to the sessions that they've provided for kids and the results that they're having. How much would you encourage coaches who feel like they finish a session and they get 400 questions from parents to perhaps look at how they're communicating to those parents on the sidelines?
Yeah, I mean, I feel for them. I really do, because I've never been one of those parents that wanted to go and ask those. I wanted to ask those questions, but I perhaps wasn't brave enough. But I think for the parents that do, you have to kind of recognise where it's coming from. And for the coaches, actually, I would really advocate taking the time, maybe at the start of a season or mid-season or whatever it is, or even before a game, and to just try and communicate that clarity about what you're doing. And it may feel like, oh gosh, I've got enough to be doing just managing this team, but it might actually work to your advantage and actually reduce that sense of constant questions. And I think you can lay down some parameters like, this is what we're doing. This is the plan for today. This match means this. This is how I'm going to handle it. And after the game, it would be great if you didn't come to me, because I'd like to get into the changing room and just debrief with the team, rather than saying nothing, looking awkward, and then parents bombarding you and you feeling overwhelmed and pressured. I think setting up that space for a conversation would be really good, and provides people with the reassurance that you see them as part of the story. I think there is a danger that there's this idea that parents don't have a place in this, but they so do. And I think Marcia and I would both say, now supporting, grown-up players who are playing professionally, you're still so much part of that story as well, because to be good on the pitch, they have to be able to manage so much in life, and that to the idea that parents should just sort of, they often say it, you know, be silent on the sidelines and grateful in the meetings. And it's a bit like, well, what, you know, if this is school, we'd have quite a different approach to it. And I think we should be saying it's the same kind of thing. And we encourage parents to say, if this was an issue at school, you'd go in and have a conversation. So why wouldn't you do it in a football situation? You know, go and have a proper conversation about what's your expectation, what are you confused about, what questions do you have? But do it on, we always say, do that at the right time. Don't do it after a game when the team's just come off the pitch and the coach is exhausted, and, you know, do it, arrange a time and do it. But I think if coaches could show an openness to that, parents will really appreciate that.
So the message is that parents should feel that they can go and ask questions. How important is it for coaches to remember that that parent is their child's number one fan, not that coach's number one critic?
I mean, it's, you know, that's true, and I think the more a coach can empathise with that, the better, because there's no two ways about it. You can never really separate the child from the family unit and those that are the support network. They're always going to want the best for that child, and sometimes maybe are a bit blinkered about what's in front of them. But I think we would always say that there is a need for reality. And one of the things that we find really difficult is, and I think this is for the clubs as well, is that there is a lack of honesty about this journey. We hear the 1% or the 0.01% of all kids that play football, and the 1% that go into academies will make a professional debut, but that doesn't mean a career in football. So I think we spend a lot of time trying to sort of say, the reality is if you come into an academy at under 9, half of you will be gone by 16. So just think about that, and then think about what do you want out of this, because that's the reality. And that many players who even get to the more serious professionalised stages of being an under 16 and a scholar or a young professional will never get more than a single debut. They will never play regular football in a professional league. So we have to give parents that information properly, not just the sort of stat that's chucked out, but talk that through to say, what else does this journey bring, and what will you help your child see in that, which to us is so important for preparing anyone to see them moving on from a club or coming out of the sport due to injury, or that they'd like to do something different, that's not seen as wasted time or wasted effort, that they've actually gained from that process. And I think that coaches, it's sensitive, but being quite honest with parents about where a child is at and, what level and what you're hoping that they can achieve in a season and so on, and helping parents see that the reality of this, I think is really important. But I also know there'll be some where it just goes over their heads.
Kate, this has been an incredibly enlightening chat. Thank you so much for joining us on the Play Their Way podcast.
You're welcome.
And thank you for listening wherever you are. If you've enjoyed the podcast today, be sure to leave us a review and share this with someone else who you think might like it too. And follow Play Their Way on social media, at Play Their Way on TikTok and LinkedIn, and at Play Their Way UK on Facebook and Instagram. See you soon.